And when you go into here, you are in their waters, and you may never safely return, because this ensures that you are dead on the waters. You see, this is a ship in the sea of... Well, it's in the sea of air, in the sea of water. That is why it is a citizen ship, whereas this is the living document. And when you go into court or anywhere like that, and you bring that into you, that notifies those dead entities that you are living, that you are a man or a woman, not a person. This is a person, this is a man. And so I am not a person, I am a man, a flesh, blood man. This person can go to jail. This person, they can have this person on your birth certificate, which is a death certificate, but your live born record tells you that you are living. Please acquire your live birth record, folks. Please go to the registry and have this with you at all times, and get out of the jurisdiction of the police and the judges, for they are committing fraud against your name, against your living being status, and they are reducing you to a person. A person is a corporation. You don't want to be a corporation. A corporation is a corpse. It's dead. It does not live, it does not speak. They can't hear your voice in court. It's a commercial process. They can only deal with the dead in their ship of citizenships. And you don't want to be a citizen. You want to be a sovereign under God's jurisdiction, and take yourself out of their ship, their citizenship, because this is a ship of admiralty law. And when you go into here, you are in their waters, and you may never safely return.
On this edition of The Fifth Estate,
We have a warning for you tonight.
it was General Motors' deadly secret.
What happened to this GM car? Crappy little Cobalt.
Now, a startling look inside the GM culture that put a price on their customers' lives.
GM made a business decision not to fix these safety defects.
The dead Canadians who might have been saved.
He died for a 57-cent piece that should have been fixed over 10 years ago.
And the life or death question, what's Transport Canada doing to protect you? It's incumbent upon the manufacturer to let Transport Canada know about a defect in a timely fashion.
That's right.
Is it almost a decade and a half in timely fashion? I'm Bob McEwen. This is The Fifth Estate. Ahead, the story of the switch from hell. Safety defects. GM didn't. The company somehow rationalized that a loss of power, even at high speed, wasn't really a safety issue, but more of a customer convenience issue. And there was no recall. Instead, what General Motors did was send this service bulletin to its dealers in Canada and the US, telling them the Cobalt ignition could be rotated out of position by an especially heavy key ring, but no warning about the deadly possibilities if it was. An indication that General Motors was about to secretly replace that tiny but defective ignition part, the detent plunger, and no recall. According to auto industry critic Clarence Ditlow, GM has long been keenly aware of the cost of recalling and repairing its vehicles.
They certainly do a cost analysis. They've done cost-benefit analysis of what it would cost to save a life.
A case in point, the memo from a GM engineer in the 70s that was infamous for its callous calculation of the cost per car, at which it no longer made financial sense for General Motors to try to save a life with a part change or recall. How much was too much? Incredibly, that prohibitive amount was just $2.40 per vehicle. So it's worth it to pay the damages of the lawsuit when somebody dies in a fire because of a faulty part?
That's right.
Rather than
or not pay anything?
It's cheaper to
my ass pay anything
the lawsuit than it is to put the safety into the vehicle.
Shares of General Motors fell sharply today after the brokerage firm Goldman Sachs urged investors to sell the stock.
And as the world economy began its downward spiral in 2007 and 8, financial considerations apparently were far more pressing than fixing those troublesome ignition switches.
The idea of having to recall, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of cars to make a repair was going to cost the company money at a time when it didn't have money.
Marianne Keller is a longtime auto industry analyst who's written 2 books about General Motors and its culture.
You don't speak up in meetings. You don't talk about the problem. If you do talk about the problem and become very aggressive about it, you're branded a disgruntled employee and your career ends. Simple.
Hey guys, you are looking at GM CEO Dan Akerson. He has just driven the first Bolt up onto the stage here.
After all the attention to bankruptcy and bailouts, GM was intent on shifting the spotlight, here announcing a new electric car. But it still couldn't escape its past. April 2013, Detroit, Michigan, a meeting room at the Westin Hotel. Lawyer Lance Cooper, representing Brooke Melton's family in their suit against General Motors, started taking depositions. On the hot seat, the GM engineer who'd supervised development of the cobalt ignition switch.
Yeah, right.
Ray
Who
DeGiorgio.
gets to the hot seat?
Remember,
Who
he
gets
called it
that
the
far?
switch from hell.
Primarily, it was the project engineer for the ignition switch in that vehicle.
You'll also recall Lance Cooper's team had discovered that GM secretly replaced the defective part. But asked whether he'd approved the change, Engineer DeGiorgio denied any knowledge of it whatsoever.
We certainly did not approve a detent plunger design change.
I asked him as many different ways as I could, whether he knew of a change, whether GM knew of a change. He said, I don't know, GM doesn't know. He said, I've spoken with the supplier, they don't know of any change. There was no change ever made. And then we presented him with the photograph showing the change, and his position was, I don't know anything about this.
Did you ever authorize Delphi?
Ray DeGiorgio was then asked by the General Motors lawyer if he had approved that new ignition switch. Again, he denied it all.
Absolutely not.
So if any such change was made, it was made without your knowledge and authorization.
That is correct.
But after DeGiorgio made those claims he knew nothing, this document surfaced, a letter from GM to the supplier called Delphi that made the controversial ignition switches. It was dated 2006, but only came to light 8 years later, after
We go through some news you can trust. Can we look at specifics? Because sometimes, tell me what you want to know. I think sometimes you can make generalities, right? And that you can get away with a lot.
Well, I think let's talk about specifics. That in itself was a generality.
Let's look at this one. Or in the book, you say in the book, let's kill the General Motors. Let's take it back from its shareholders.
General Motors.
Scribble out the name and the logo, and let's use its resources for something more valuable.
Now, Evan, I hope you're not going to use this opportunity for you, an Oxford-educated economist, to come on the TV and be rude to me.
I'm not being rude.
An autodidact, a self-educated man, for simply trying to suggest that there might be an alternative to corporate hegemony, that there might be an alternative to our governments bending over for the benefit of big corporations.
I want to raise this
that's what ordinary people care about, mate. It's affecting ordinary people's lives. I don't know if it's affecting the places you hang out and where you drink.
Let me speak.
Tell me what you need to know.
Yeah, there may be. I mean, you're very good in this book.
Thanks.
And you're going to get a lot of praise for the way you document.
Praise. I want change.
You're going to get a lot of praise
change. Great.
for identifying a lot that people don't like about society at the moment. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to spot things that are wrong with society at the moment, right?
Absolutely.
We have the bejeweled bus you talk about. 85 people in the world who have as much as 55 billion.
What's your point, Evan? What's your point,
point is,
come on.
You
sharpen up. You're in big shoes.
You propose another system, and it might be that your system is better.
Yes.
Or it might be that you haven't had the imagination to think about the problems that the other system has. So I'm trying to get into a detail here, which you want to take.
Imagination? That's your accusation. What's the problem with my imagination?
I want to take an example of something you say.
Take the example.
Take General Motors from its shareholders.
Absolutely.
Do you know who owns it? The United Auto Workers Union owns a chunk of it. The Canadian government owns a chunk of it. You take it from them, and
Evan, are you seriously telling me that the corporate world, companies like Monsanto and Pfizer, are operating on behalf of us, ordinary people? Is that your argument? Are you coming on Newsnight, a great British institution, to say that corporations like Vodafone, Amazon,
sometimes
Google, who don't pay their tax in this country, who are aided and assisted by our government, while people fill the squares arrested for possessing tarpaulin so they can peacefully protest, you want to say that corporates are getting a rough ride?
I don't say they're getting a rough ride.
Look, you've got a proper job.
I want to ask you...
But why don't you answer some questions?
I want to ask what you propose that people who own General Motors should do when you have taken...
I don't want to follow you down blind alleys about silly administrative quibbles. Let me be absolutely clear. I don't trust politicians. No one does. I don't want to look at a graph, mate. I ain't got time for a bloody graph. Well, this is what I want to take this opportunity to talk to the people of this country and tell them to get involved in creative direct action. That's a lovely graph.
It goes back to
1862. This is the kind of stuff that people like you use to confuse people like us. I've got a graph, mate.
I'm not trying to confuse you.
You've not just come from the New Era estate where Boris Johnson, who takes 5 times more meetings a year with bankers than he does ordinary people. We've got a graph. Everything's tidy.
Trying to just take you seriously. And I'm really
okay, well, tell me what you want to do with the graph.
It shows real wages and how people's wages have gone up over the last 150 years.
Do you ever go
outside?
It's
terrible. Just look at the right.
Do you ever go outside, Evan?
Right-hand side. Look how.
That's so funny.
Goes down. Sure. Well below zero. That's the worst it's been for the last 150 years.
Sure.
Right? Go back over the previous bits, though.
Don't talk to me like that, mate.
Wages have been going up all the time. Now, if I gave you a button here, you can push that button and get rid of that down bit at the very end.
Evan, I'm not
But you get rid of a lot of the up bits.
What is your point?
My point is that revolutions sometimes have good effects, but they also wipe out more than they intended.
Thank you. You could have said that in 5 seconds without the daft graph.
Well, I think the graph is very interesting.
Here's my point. Is the systems we have at the moment aren't going to change within themselves because those systems are working for precisely the function they're intended to. Yeah. They work they enhance the power and profits of elites. They support the rights of corporate down blind alleys about silly administrative quibbles. Let me be absolutely clear. I don't trust politicians. No one does. I don't trust the corporations in this country that you inadvertently work for every time you take this line with me. What I'm saying is that people can run their own workplaces. People can run their own communities. The people of this country have been patronised enough, mate, and let's not do it in this interview.
You have another one. I'm not patronising anybody.
Good.
You say you want General Motors to stop making cars that break down in a few years.
Mate, you carry
so they can sell all of them. Well, do you really believe that cars are made to break down?
What, built-in obsolescence? Yeah, I believe in built-in obsolescence, don't you?
Well, I tell you what, when I was a kid,
people make deliberately exploit any one of us.
We went on holiday. We could barely guarantee to get
You're much more tactile than the Jeremy geezer. He hated it when I touched his legs.
The cars were so unreliable, they've become much more reliable. And I sort of think the companies that made obsolescent cars went out of business.
You think that, do you?
Well,
I honestly think that.
I posit that as at least a theory of capitalism.
I don't want to. I'm not going to sit here with you. I know you know that capitalism isn't working. I know you know that a system that requires quantitative easing to hold it together, while energy companies are subsidised by our taxes, while renewable energies are ignored. I know you can't support that system, Evan. I know you're mates with CEOs of big business.
Let me bring up the graph.
I don't want to look at a graph, mate. I ain't got time for a bloody graph.
That's another way of thinking about it. Well, that's the normal world. That's the garden with the snake in it, and that's chaos. That's the chaos that arises when your plans collapse, right? That's the world and the underworld. And so the underworld's always there, and it's lurking beneath everything. It's like the figure of the shark in the Jaws poster, right? There you are, swimming at the top, and there's that terrible thing underneath that can come up and pull you down. Well, that's the world. So you need to be able to operate here, and you need to be able to operate here. And when you operate here, well, that's when you rescue your father from the belly of the whale. That's when you go down, you see, when you're down in chaos and you don't know what the hell's going on, you have to rediscover the values that have oriented people forever. That's what you have to discover. So, for example, when I'm dealing with people who have post-traumatic stress disorder, and they've usually encountered someone malevolent, they have to relearn the description of good and evil. Because if they don't, they have no framework. They're lost. They think, well, there's a malevolence afoot in the world. And I'm a naive I'm a prey animal, a naive prey animal for the malevolence of the world. It's like, well, good luck functioning under that set of assumptions, man. You just do not recover from that. You stay at home in your burrow. That's what you do. Well, you have to. You go down into that, you think, okay, well, malevolence is afoot. I better be the sort of person that can understand it and deal with it. And that's another reason why you have to transform yourself into a monster. That's the Jungian incorporation of the shadow. It's no bloody joke. Because the only thing that a monster won't mess with is another monster. And you might say, well, I don't want to transform myself into a monster. It's like, you don't have a choice. You can either be a pathetic monster, or you can be a monster with some power. Those are your options. There's no non-monster alternative, weak or strong. And I don't mean strong like dominating tyrant strength. That isn't what I mean at all. I mean strength like functioning at a funeral strength. And that's a kind of monstrosity. And when you're down in chaos, that's what you have to rediscover.
Right hand of God in the fornax. Right hand of God in the fornax. Start with my story, right? They can hear okay?
Yep, you should be fine.